Muchas gracias a todos, un placer, buenos días, un placer estar acá y ser parte del coloquio IDEA. Hoy tengo el placer de conversar con Polman. Paul es un líder transformacional, visionario, un embajador del medio ambiente. Y hoy nos invita a reflexionar sobre nuestro rol como líderes, sobre la responsabilidad que tenemos en generar un futuro más sustentable y equitativo, con un impacto positivo en el desempeño de nuestros negocios. I will turn to English now. Hello, Paul. Nice to meet you. Welcome to Argentina, at least virtually.
Bienvenido a Argentina, aunque sea virtualmente. Gracias por estar con nosotros.
Ha visitado muchas veces de COVID, no hemos visitado los últimos 2 años, pero tengo mucho respeto por la gente y con una situación no tan fácil, tienen siempre el optimismo y el ganas de mejorar su país y yo espero que esta conferencia va a ayudar también en este sentido. Gracias por la oportunidad, pero vamos a hacer el charla en inglés. Es mejor para transferir las ideas claves en esta discusión.
Thank you, Paul. And as I said, you really transform what you did in Unilever and being a CEO for almost a decade. But I know that the audience would like to know what you have been doing since then. Could you please share your thoughts?
Desde entonces, ¿podría compartir sus ideas? Sí, gracias Florencia por la oportunidad. Lo que descubrí es que fui durante 10 años el CEO de Unilever y vi que después de 10 años la tarea de CEO tenía sus limitaciones. Había muchas cosas para hacer en la sociedad y muchas cosas de las que son responsables los CEOs y que es difícil que cumplan. ¿Cómo se hace una agricultura sostenible? Por ejemplo, la soja. ¿Cómo se detiene la deforestación?
How do you get governments to move to a responsible future? For example, when it comes to decarbonizing our global economy, which is absolutely needed. Although the businesses broadly globally are held to a higher level of trust than government now, we cannot achieve the targets just by ourselves. So I've entirely concentrated on the Sustainable Development Goals, goals that I had the fortune to help develop myself, and really ask the question, as we are behind, how can we accelerate the implementation of these goals, especially around climate change and inequality? Unfortunately, when COVID came, it moved us back about 15 to 20 years on these goals. We've seen that we are way off on issues like climate change still. We are way off on issues like inequality. In fact, COVID pushed 150 million people more into poverty. In your country alone, regretfully, not excluded either, the numbers are not going in the right direction. So how can we bring businesses together at scale and speed to drive more transformative changes? That is one of the reasons I created a new social enterprise called Imagine, where our theory of change is very simple. If we can put enough CEOs together at critical mass across the value chain, we can actually create the broader system changes that are needed. We've put, for example, 60 companies together in the fashion industry, which is a fairly destructive industry for many reasons, on labor standards, on destructions of biodiversity, on plastics in the oceans, on carbon emission. Together, these 80 companies are moving quite rapidly to green energy by, for example, jointly buying. Together, they move to regenerative cotton and transform markets away from the devastating practices that are currently there. Together, they're implementing the Paris Agreement and stay below 1.5 degrees. Together, they move to single-use plastics. We've put together the 30 companies in food, moving to regenerative agriculture, something that's very important for your country as being one of the major exporters of agriculture. We're looking at private equity and trying to change private equity by bringing in better impact measures. And the reason that that is gaining traction is because when you have 20 to 25% of an industry together, civil society wants to join, governments are getting interested, and you can drive the needed systems changes that are needed. Interestingly, bringing the CEOs together as well make them collectively more courageous. Individually, still many CEOs are worried. Can I do sustainability and achieve the profits? Can purpose and profit live next to each other? And increasingly, by being together, we learn from each other, we become more courageous and set the bar higher to accelerate the changes that we need. In the spare time that I've had, I've also spent time on leadership development. I chair the Said Business School at Oxford, which is one of the best business schools, and am part of the Prime movement with 1,000 universities to change the way we teach people. Many of the MBA programs is still, may I say, Milton Friedman on steroids. So how can we get the best leadership that we need? And then finally, I advised the UK government, the French government, the Indonesian government, for example, on things around the G20 or G7, COP26, the climate summit that is going to be held in Glasgow, but also the COP15 on biodiversity or the UN Food System Summit to ensure that we get more ambition out of the governments, because ultimately we need to work together to address these challenges. And just being less bad or being neutral in our impact is not good enough anymore. We have to become net positive, and that's one of the reasons I found some time during COVID and all the other activities to also write a book.
Agree, Paul, and as you said, it's critical to be change agents in this process. And you know that the Colloquio Idea, the main claim of the Colloquio Idea is let's achieve a sustainable country, sustainable Argentina. And we all know that there are many companies that are moving forward to be less bad, as you said in your book, to be more good, and to, in a way, to reduce the damage they created. And how do you see the business in the future? What does the better business look like? Considering your book, as you said before, your focus is mainly in net positive. How we can be more net positive companies?
Yeah, well, it's very simple. Earth's Overshoot Day this year was July 29th, which is the day that we use up more resources than the world can replenish. In other words, every day after that, we're stealing from future generations. We have lost 68% of our species, mammals, birds, reptiles, in the last 5 decades. We've cut half of the world's rainforests. Another 1 million species are at the point of being extinct. Just being in the CSR space, important as it may be, which really deals with less bad and attacking some of these negative externalities, is simply not good enough anymore. Less bad means that if I was a murderer and killed 10 people, and now I'm only killing 5 people, am I a better murderer? I don't think so. On issues like climate change, we're still way off track. The next 10 years, we need a 45% reduction in emission. By all means possible, by the way. Less costly for the world. But we're still projecting a 16% increase. So then companies say, I understand that CSR is not enough. I need to integrate it in my whole company and be more ambitious. So I'm going to be sustainable. But sustainable is about neither being good nor being bad. Not a bad position to be in, but clearly again is not enough. We need to increasingly start to think restorative, reparative, regenerative, which we call net positive. And that is difficult to do. And the book describes in very simple terms what we need to do there. First, in the personal transformation and how to get courage as a leader, because it ultimately starts at the top. But then also, how do we implement it in our companies, in our value chain, at industry level, and ultimately together with government, civil society. The book doesn't shy away from very practical examples on how to do it. The what for us is actually less of interest. I think most people are convinced that these changes need to be made, but they struggle with the how. And then we don't shy away from some of the challenges of CEO compensation, money in politics, corruption, trade associations saying different things, and some of the tax payments, and some of the other challenges that business has to deal with. We believe that it creates a different frame of mind, that we can create a movement around the different parts of society, we set a different benchmark of what good would look like. And it's a tremendous opportunity. This is not driven by any compromise. Study after study, day after day, that we can see now that companies that are run more sustainably for the longer term, with sustainability or purpose at its core, are also companies that perform better. Companies that attack these negative externalities better than others, even within their industries, their own industries, are also companies that have a higher market value. So it's important that we all go into this direction, not only for the future of humanity, but also to ensure that we continue to run successful businesses. What do we call net positive? These are businesses that take the ownership, if you want to, of all impacts and consequences of them being there, intended or not. With a very simple question, is the world better off because you're in it or not? These are businesses that operate for the long-term benefit of business and society, that create a positive return for all stakeholders, which for us includes the planet and future generations, which drives shareholder value not only as a result, they drive shareholder value as a result of what they do, not as a myopic objective. And then last but not least, they are actively involved in the broader changes that society needs. So you start to see increasingly net positive companies showing up. Microsoft making a commitment to recuperate carbon emission since they started the company in 1975. Walmart and others making commitments to go to regenerative agriculture. Other companies making commitments to move minimum wages up well beyond the standards that the government set. Google now coming out with programs that help consumers make more sustainable choices, be it on investments or be it on things of what products they want to buy or etc. So increasingly, we see companies moving to this net positive area, and these companies are not only more resilient, have better managed the COVID crisis, if you want to, but are also better positioned for this future that we all aspire to have.
Sorry, we have the airplanes, so that's why the noise. So sorry about it. So, Paul, we talk about, and you mentioned in your book as well, and in every talk that you give, is putting values into actions. And this is one of the main pillars of the colloquio and in our agenda. And you mentioned that it's key for leaders to be humble, to be courageous. So you talk about courage and courageous leadership. And considering, as you mentioned before, the mega trends that we are facing, the significant challenges such as COVID, you already mentioned, the climate stress world, inequalities, why do you think we need more courageous leaders in the organizations to move forward and to make a change?
Well, Florencia, as I said, we are moving. I think many people are aware of the challenges. There are not many CEOs who want more climate change or unemployment or people going to bed hungry. Yet collectively, we're not getting the answers that we need. Look at the challenges in your part of the world, but that is a micro reflection of what we deal with in other parts of the world. What is very clear is that politics is not in fine shape. In many countries, we have nationalists, xenophobics, populists. Our multilateral institutions are not functioning quite the way we want. So the argument that we have in the book, really, it is in the interest of business to be a more active actor into ensuring that society can function. There is no business case in enduring poverty, nor do I believe that business can be a bystander in a system that gives them life in the first place. So since we have never been so forewarned about the things that are going to happen, but also forearmed with tools around it, it is absolutely important that individuals step up to the plate, individually if you want to, and collectively from the business community to drive these broader changes. And that takes courage. It takes courage to do the harder right than the easier wrong. It takes courage to set targets that you know the world is needing, but that for which you don't have yet all the answers. It takes courage to work with others in these partnerships that are needed, that are sometimes disclosing the uncomfortable truths or where you're not totally in charge. You know, and courage comes actually from the French word cœur, that means heart.
Yes.
And what we have seen during COVID, especially, that the companies that do well, the leaders that actually have shown the true beacon or the direction we need to go, are leaders indeed that operate with a high level of empathy, humanity, humility, compassion. Leaders that have a strong sense of purpose, because these changes are not so easy. Lots of critics and skeptics along the way, lots of obstacles to overcome. You need to have that strong inner compass. These leaders think multi-generational, are systemic thinkers, and above all can also work in these broader partnerships that we need to tackle. So these are the type of leaders that have actually done very well. I think in your approach, where you look for transformative partnerships with business, government, and civil society, also in Argentina, is the only way to overcome some of these big challenges that you have of the need for job creation or attacking the inequalities that you have, at the same time dealing with the pandemic. You know, these are so many changes that are coming at the same time, at the speed of the technological revolution, at the scale of the industrial revolution, that it frankly needs all of us. And I'm actually glad, and that's why I'm here, that IDEA plays such a broad role in not only driving the values that are needed into the Argentinian business community, but that you can also foster these broader partnerships and create these multiplier effects that we need.
And Paul, how do you feel about you mentioned that the partnerships, to have partnerships is key to be a net positive company and to articulate the efforts. How do you feel at this collective effort that we need to make to start a new course? How do you feel? Are you optimistic or pessimistic? And how do you feel about, we are moving fast enough or not?
Well, we're clearly not moving fast enough, but at least we're moving in the direction. And we have probably made more progress than the world realizes. If I may just take climate change, people were saying during COVID, when COVID came regretfully, which by the way is a good reminder that we cannot have healthy people on an unhealthy planet. It's also a good reminder what the consequences are of destruction of biodiversity. These are zoonotic diseases. The surprise was really not COVID, because we've had SARS, Zika, Ebola, Asian flu, and many of the other things. The surprise was actually our inability to work together as governments of this world to do something about it. And fortunately, we saw local communities coming together, businesses stepping up their activities that resulted in getting a vaccine in a short period of time. But this was a warning sign for all of us, and not the finest moment. Everybody thought a year and a half ago, when I would be doing these talks, all the businesses must be cutting back on ESG or on sustainability. They must just focus on profit alone again and cutting costs. Nothing could be farther from the truth. I chair the UN Global Compact for the Secretary General. We had 14,000 members before COVID. We have 17,000 members now. We had about 1,000 companies making commitments, of the biggest companies, to be net zero by 2050.
Yes.
We now have the commitment of 3,000 companies. And even on the government level, including Argentina, by the way, we had only 21 countries before COVID making a commitment to be net zero by 2050, which is the Paris Agreement. Now we have 131 countries. So civil society is moving, people are speaking out, Businesses are starting to move. The financial market sees these opportunities. Increasingly, governments are moving. So if we now can foster these broader partnerships and work together to make these structural changes, then by all means we can get there. And by the way, my message is very simple. It is the biggest opportunity we have. If you look at COVID, regretfully, we have spent in Europe and the US more or less $17 trillion to save lives and livelihoods, and we're not out of the woods at all. $17 trillion. The IMF estimates that we have lost $26 trillion in the global economy in GDP terms. That is infinitely higher than the money we have to spend to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, which is about $3 to $5 trillion a year. The cost of inaction has now become significantly higher than the cost of action, which also means that businesses that understand that can see this as an enormous opportunity, and the smart businesses seize that. The businesses that want to continue to deny that, I think increasingly put themselves at risk and will end up in the graveyard of dinosaurs.
That's great, and definitely we need to take action now, as you said. You have a large number of business leaders here in the room and following you in YouTube. Would you like to give any advice, or what would be your call to action to all of us?
Well, you have many smart business leaders that set the tone and have always done. Also in Argentina, you have some incredible businesses. You know how to be resilient in that environment. You know how to deal with unexpected surprises in that environment. And yet you have businesses that have been around for decades, if not for centuries, because you can navigate these choppy waters. But increasingly, with the pace of change picking up, it offers threats for the ones that don't adapt, but enormous opportunities for the ones that adapt. And my message is really three. It starts with being courageous and being the inspirational leaders that these organizations deserve. Leaders that take responsibility of their total impact into society. Leaders that set targets that they know are needed. Leaders that work with these partnerships. So that's my first message. The second message is really about the enormous opportunity we have here. This is anybody who understands this and seizes this and prepares him or herself well for the future will be rewarded. Unilever had a 300% shareholder return over the 10 years, a 19% return on invested capital over those 10 years, despite doing 64 acquisitions. This is our biggest business opportunity, and increasingly companies that are making this change, the Teslas, the Orsteds, the Nestes and many others, are getting significant valuations as well from the financial market. And my final message is basically the need to work in partnerships. And I know it's difficult also in your country sometimes to work in these partnerships. And when you have these big changes moving to the left and to the right, it's not always easy. But we can only solve the broader challenges that we have if we all come together. And even if it's not your government you've chosen for, or if it's not a company that you would ideally like to work with, this is the time that we rise to the challenge. It is only with that combined strengths that we can really solve the issues at a different level than that they are created, and that obligation to do that is now. Otherwise, the consequences will be significantly worse than what we already have to deal with now. So you're well placed. I've always admired you for your ability to adapt, your agility, your resilience. And again, I know for sure that you will turn this into one of your biggest opportunities and become a major force for Latin America, for the world, in creating this more equitable and sustainable future that we all want. And that's probably one of the reasons, Florencia, to probably end on. That's one of the reasons why I'm actually optimistic. The first one is we always underestimate the speed of technology and with which technology moves. And it makes me optimistic to see how many things we have already within our reach available today that could provide us with these solutions to these challenges. The second reason is the young are really speaking up. They don't want to work for companies anymore that are irresponsible. They are demanding the changes of their governments. They're moving forward with creative solutions that we should embrace. And the third reason is really the cost of inaction being greater than the cost of action. Even if you believe in shareholder primacy, even if you believe in profit being the main driver of your business, which I don't necessarily subscribe to, but assume you're in that, you automatically have to conclude now that the best way to continue to exist, to continue to be profitable, is to attack these challenges of people and planet if you want to. So if people ask me, are you an optimist or a pessimist? I've always felt that it's better to be an optimist. You have a happier life. I've also felt that going the pessimist route never leads to anywhere. So I'd call myself a prisoner of hope. And if we can all drive to that higher level of what you might call purpose-driven leadership, I think we can all come out of this crisis significantly better than we went in. And that is the desire of 95% of the CEOs I talk to, 100% of the population. And I tend to believe also a safer and more stable environment for the politicians if we can get there.
Thank you, Paul, very inspiring, and I'm sure that maybe you don't feel through the screen, but here you have a large audience with a strong willingness to take action. We have 3 minutes left, so any uplifting message that you would like to deliver and to share with the audience now?
Well, I think my uplifting message is already on hope. One of my great friends in Argentina, amongst many friends I have, is Charlie Alberti, who was the great drummer of Soda Stereo, one of the bands that I grew up with. They had courage in a regime at that time that wasn't very easy to rally the people and gave them hope. But again, he stepped up in R21 with his organization. And anytime I see him talk to the young people and any of the universities I've been with you, or even the shows of Cirque du Soleil, playing their music and showing what is possible and seeing everybody sing in unity, I know that you have this enormous force, that enormous optimism, that enormous desire to improve the lives for all of the people in any part of the world. Argentina cannot be successful if you only create small islands of prosperity in an ocean of poverty. Argentina cannot be successful if it doesn't produce the products that increasingly the world is going to demand. Argentina will not be successful if you exclude too many people. You have delivered a great Pope. You have delivered our Queen in the Netherlands, so we want to thank you for that. You have an influence well around beyond your country, but now is the time for all of us, for all of you, to step up and also show that collectively we can certainly get a better outcome than what we are currently seeing around us. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your courage, and thank you for being part of the solution and creating businesses that we can be proud of to have them around.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for such an inspiring and insightful conversation. Personally, I would like to recognize you, and I really admire what you have been doing to impact so many people's lives. So thank you so much. Now I would like to turn just a second to Spanish to tell something to the audience, and un poco lo que les quiero compartir, como decía Paul, que esto no es un momento, esto no debe ser un momento, esto es un movimiento positivo, y como decía Paula al inicio, es un movimiento hacia revertir la tendencia, hacia actuar, hacia capitalizar esta gran oportunidad que tenemos de generar un mundo sustentable, una sociedad sustentable, por todos nosotros y por nuestras futuras generaciones. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Paul, again. And nice to see you. Hoping to see you next time in Argentina in person. Thank you.
Gracias, Florencia, y mucha suerte en el camino y hasta pronto. Un abrazo.
Gracias.